Hello, this presentation entitled Authenticity and Multimodal Communication in Online Intercultural Exchanges is presented by me, who's Marta Giralt. You can see me in the left-hand side. I'm a lecturer in Spanish and Applied Linguistics in the University of Limerick.
And I'm Dr. Florence le Baron-Earle. I'm also lecturing in languages in French, more specifically at the University of Limerick. And I will be presenting this with Marta. You're very welcome.
So first thing, just going to give you a quick summary. So we are going to start with the conceptual framework for our presentation, which could be basically, we'll talk briefly about telecollaboration and intercultural communicative development, multimodality and authenticity. And then we'll present the context of the two studies that our research is based on. Then the data we gathered, the findings from that data, and then some conclusions and recommendations. So just to start with the conceptual framework, the first thing we like to mention is telecollaboration. And just following Odo's definition of telecollaboration as the application of online communication tools to bring together classes of language learners that are in different parts of the world, and for developing their foreign language skills and intercultural competence, doing collaborative tasks or collective projects. And there's been quite a lot of research about how telecollaboration can raise intercultural awareness and bring intercultural learning. So we just here referencing some studies that they've been carrying out in the last 10 years. A part of telecollaboration, another important concept for our framework is multimodality. And we understand multimodal competence or multimodality as a set of abilities and skills where oral, visual, and digital literacy overlap. So communication happens through different modes, not just the textual mode, if not also visual or musical, hyperlink, etc. So, and this is important as evidence suggests that empowers participants to create and share meaningful artifacts as students become agents and designers. So that's these meaningful artifacts that we'll be exploring in this presentation. And finally, the last concept is authenticity. And it's been an extensive debate about authenticity in language learning. We're going to talk about authenticity from the language use point of view. So using the language in an authentic way, in a meaningful way. And we understand that authenticity as a social phenomenon that constantly redefined by the interactions which take place. And also is a process of appropriation and agency shaped according to the needs of the social context and situation. So we have here also a few quotations from different authors. So that's basically our framework. And now I'm just going to give the word to my colleague, who's going to talk about the context of the studies.
Okay, so where did it take place and who was involved? So we carried out two studies. So the first one was led by Marta, and it included Irish students from the University of Limerick, and they were paired with Spanish students in the University of León, in Spain, obviously. So there were 16 Irish and 8 Spanish students. So obviously 2 students per with 1 student. And for the second study, in my case, who I teach French, I had a cohort of Irish, but also international students. And that's very important for later. We'll see the input they had. So my classroom was very much international, and I paired them with French students based in Lille-Douai. There was also a slight imbalance of number of students in my study. We had 20 students from the University of Limerick and 4 French students, but you will see later this asymmetry was actually resolved. So both studies or telecollaborative tasks took place during 8 weeks, and they had 4 specific tasks to do. So I'm going to see that into more detail. But before I do that, I just want to highlight another asymmetrical feature of our studies. So the study one, the teacher was only virtual. Students could only access it through the online, the internet. Whereas in my case, the study I led, students could see me every week in the classroom as well as contact me online. So I had a blended learning approach. In addition to this, students from the first study, the task represented 5% of their overall grade, whereas in my case, students are just a pass-fail grading system. Okay. So, what were the aims of our virtual exchanges? So, despite those small differences or asymmetry, if you want, we obviously had very common points. The first one was to develop the participants' intercultural competence, and we did that through telecollaboration. Secondly, as the tasks were carried out in the language class, well, the second objective was to improve the students' language proficiency. So in telecollaboration, since the tasks are carried out in the target language, students not only share information about culture and exchange viewpoints, they also improve their vocabulary and language skills. Now, coming to the third aim. Through the various online activities, students were able to experience a virtual mobility. So it's something that students consider as authentic interactions. Okay? And also, finally, a significant sample of the participants, but not all, were about to embark on their actual physical period abroad, Erasmus+. And so their project also prepared them for that mobility program. So it's important for instructors to carefully think about the course's objectives and how the tasks and technologies may enable students to reach these aims before they implement internet-based technology. So in other words, it needs to be fit for purpose. Okay, so well, for the purpose of this study, we have been very careful to include a variety of tasks which would gradually learn learners from an ethnocentric stage to an ethno-relative stage, okay, to take Bennett's words. So that is through a progression of their intercultural sensitivity. So if you look at the work of O'Dowd and Ware, who are experts in telecollaboration, they identify three main categories of tasks. The first one being information exchange, the second one comparison and analysis, and the third one collaborating on product creation. Well, all three types of tasks were included in our two studies. I'm going to show you now what we were asking students to do. So they had to introduce themselves, present university life, cultural features from their respective countries, and then compare these elements with their partners. They had to provide advice about living abroad, things that are very practical, like what to put in a suitcase. And finally, write letters from abroad, so a creative writing part. So if you look a bit more closely, the first two tasks, well, students became the authors of cultural autobiographies. So this enabled them to establish a personal relationship with their partners, while also increasing their awareness of cultural differences. So this first approach, this first contact is very important. And with the comparison of cultural features, so that's part 2 of task 2 and also task 3, students engage in informal discussion, so they carried out virtual interviews if you want. The screenshots on the right hand side of this slide, they show you examples of the interaction that took place. So that was via video conferences or chat rooms, for instance. So this type of task, as O'Dowd and Ware point out, is not only efficient to develop the student ICC, it also provides them with independence and it develops their fluency in the target language. And finally, with the fourth task, students collaborated creatively. They created a written document together. Okay? And it's important to remind you that all these tasks were carried out with a wide variety of tools and skills. Obviously, that's the multimodal part of our presentation today. So now Marta is going to show you how the data was collected.
So for the data gathering, we use different mechanisms, different tools. So we have reflexive portfolios that the students wrote at the end of the project, just reflecting about their learning experience in terms of intercultural learning, language gains, and preparation for the Erasmus mobility. Then they had to do a survey at the end of the study, of the project. Study A and Study B, all the students completed the survey with SurveyMonkey. And then we have the multimodal artifacts, which is the artifacts that the students created during their exchanges using a variety of tools, PowerPoint, Prezi, VoiceThread, Google Doc. And finally, we have the examples of the written communication that the students created, or they wrote using Schoology and Sulis, which is our virtual learning environment. Just for the data gathering, just to mention that we were using some qualitative and quantitative, so I'm putting them in relation. So after this data gathering, I'm just going to give the word to Florence, who's going to talk about the findings.
Okay, so we put the findings in different categories. So I'm going to start with the most important one. Okay, did our projects help students to develop their intercultural communicative competence? So we asked them, did the online exchanges help you understand the target and your own culture? And roughly 50% of the students agreed or strongly agreed, which is quite high. Interestingly, 0 strongly disagreed. Now we have a small amount of students, 13%, who disagreed. And really, if you look at neither agree or disagree, which is quite high, nearly 40%. So we looked at it into more detail. And if you read the comments, students actually did partake in intercultural development. They discussed food, sports, they mentioned parties, the modules, traveling, university life, but they were not sure if these were components of culture. This is why they chose neither agree or disagree. So interestingly, they did discuss about culture, but were not sure. So actually, you could argue that it was very strong, more than 45%, that actually saw a change after those courses. And if you look at what students said, okay, this is further evidence. So they particularly enjoyed the mix of nationalities. So this is from study 2, which was very international. They could discuss not only Irish culture and French culture, which were the target cultures, but also the cultures of all the other students who were represented. So they mentioned American and Korean. Okay, and I think we can move on now from the findings regarding languages. Okay, so students also found that the exchanges help improve their language competence. This is more obvious this time. You have a strong 65% who agree and strongly agree. And they specified that they felt their writing, their reading, their listening, their speaking skills, their interactive writing and interactive speaking skills all were improved through the 2 projects. And now Marta is going to continue regarding authenticity.
So the findings in authenticity, we just saw clearly that the student communication in social media was a more authentic communication. So even though students were communicating using the academic channels, we'd say, using Schoology or email, they decided to go to social media to friend their friends in Facebook or Instagram, and to keep communicating through social media. We have here some quotations from their portfolios, and the part in black is the original quotation, and then it's translated into English. So the first one says, we make contact and exchange numbers to send text messages. We friend each other in Facebook, where we were sending messages 3 or 4 times a week. So they were in regular communication. And we follow each other in social media, Snapchat, Instagram, and they found easier to keep in touch via Facebook. So they all seem to be communicating through Facebook. And if we go to the last quotation, we say we use Facebook more than Schoology because it's faster and easier. In general, Facebook is more convenient. So we see how social media was the way they decided to take to communicate in a more authentic way. We have here some examples of using WhatsApp or the Messenger in Facebook. Also, we ask in the questionnaire if what they were talking about through social media with their VIP, their virtual international partner. So some of them were talking about college life and living in general. Some of them, they use social media to talk solely about the project. And then others said we mainly use Facebook and Snapchat to mix it up a little. Also, following each other on Instagram was a cool way to keep in contact. So they are all examples about this. And then we're going to see another part that brings this authenticity, which is the students getting ready for their virtual mobility or their physical mobility. So, well, for their virtual mobility, they are not actually getting ready; they are just experiencing this virtual mobility. So that's the exchanges became authentic. They were talking with somebody from another culture, so we consider that they were digital sojourners. They were just experiencing that intercultural exchange virtually, as if they were in the country, and linguistically at the same time. Also, in the exchanges, they were preparing, the ones that they were going on Erasmus in the following semester, they were preparing for this physical mobility, and that actually motivated them and made the whole communication very authentic. It was there for a purpose. And that's some data evidence from that. So when we ask if they felt more prepared, most of them said yes. Could be because they learned a lot of culture, or they kept in touch with a partner, or they did a lot of language practice. And in general, so a generic comment would be, I learned a lot about Spanish culture. When I go on Erasmus, I would feel more confident. So it really brought confidence for their exchange. And then about the findings on multimodality, we have that the students prefer multimodal communication in their exchanges. They seem to feel very comfortable creating these multimodal artifacts. Actually, 75% preferred to use and communicate through PowerPoint presentations. In Study B, a lot of the students, or most of them, were very happy with their oral presentations, video recorded oral presentations, and also we have the video conference. So it seems that they prefer multimodal communication, and giving optionality to students on the tools they could use, because they could use any tool they wanted. We just offer them different options. It really promoted agency, and they came up with tools that we didn't actually suggested, but they were confident and happy to use those tools. And also, we just found out that multimodality enables students to talk about culture in more meaningful ways. It helps them to convey that meaning, that multiple dimension that culture has. We can see at the bottom some examples of these multimodal artifacts that they're linked to the whole presentation, so you can have a look after we've finished if you want to get more detail about it. And so we're arriving to the conclusion. So we could establish the values of multimodality, as it promotes agency and enhances communication of different aspects of the culture, and authenticity as either way, for the virtual mobility or for preparation for the physical mobility. In both cases, the type of exchanges were very authentic for our students. And we're going now to be concluding with some recommendations that my colleague is going to talk about.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a series of recommendations that we feel can really enhance this type of online exchange and provide you students with really authentic exchanges. Okay, so the first one is really to find a strong, and by strong I mean a reliable partner. Okay, so whoever you're going to work with needs to be available, you need to have good communication, and you need to ensure that you have the same aims in mind. And also being able to, before the project even starts, to resolve issues such as like timetable, time differences, deadlines. Before it even starts, you need to know if your partner is strong. The second aspect is this asymmetry that we mentioned several times. Well, it can be overcome. So do not be afraid of this asymmetry part. So we're thinking, for example, I don't have the same amount of students in my university and the partner university. This is absolutely not an issue. You just make sure you agree with the groups beforehand. And in terms of nationalities, well, when you deal with cultural competence, it's absolutely enriching to have actually this asymmetry in nationalities. So do value this aspect. Actually, it's also the reality of today. And the third point we like to stress is to have clear tasks, and they need to have progression. Okay, so we're clear guidelines. Students know what to expect. Okay, what is expected of them exactly, and this then enables them to perform better. Okay, if they understand the learning outcomes, because you often hear students saying, "What's in it for me?" Okay, well, they'll be better engaged, and they really feel that the time is valued. And they are very strategic. Okay, even for 5% of the final grade. Okay, they need to have a strong motivation by having clear tasks. So you provide them with deadlines, progression. Okay, this goes back to the taxonomy of task, and make sure that the task encompass all three types that O'Dowd and Ware mentioned. Okay, so this will not only guarantee that ICC progression is possible, but it also keeps the participants interested. And the next point I'd like to add is regular communication. Okay, students still need reassurance and know that they are progressing. Okay, so this came up in the questionnaires actually. So by communication, we understand, okay, being available to them, being their guide. If you have contact hours, make sure you have them maybe in the lab, okay, so they can do hands-on sessions with you. And the last and most important aspect is, obviously, you've guessed by now, to allow for multimodality. Multimodality and also being flexible. Okay, so our study confirmed what the literature already states, that as in that the use of a variety of online tools and skills did empower the participants. Okay, they truly created rich and meaningful conversation and products. And in addition to this, participants were active in their learning experience. They were at the center of it all. And the tutors were merely guides on the side during the entire process. Students took charge of their own learning, and they even used tools that were not recommended. So that's the flexibility we're talking about. The students surpassed the tutor's expectation in this matter. Okay, they found tools that were more efficient to carry out the task than the one we suggested. Okay, so we strongly encourage this, obviously. So it's not just what they use, but when and how they communicate. Okay, it comes from the students. So we hope that with all this recommendation, and if you're interested to do telecollaboration, you'll be able to create authentic online intercultural exchanges. So this is the end of our talk. Thank you very much for listening to it, and we hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, or if you want to know more about our work, here are our contact details. And that's it. Bye for now.